6 weeks in the hospital after a stroke, and my son-in-law never once picked up the phone to ask if I needed anything. Not once. I was discharged on a Tuesday morning in late November with $43 in my wallet, a paper bag of belongings, and a daughter who sent me a text that said, "We can't make it today, Dad. Take a rideshare," just like that. Like I was a package that needed rerouting. I stood outside the discharge entrance at St. Michael's Medical Center in Columbus, Ohio, and I watched other people's families show up. A woman in her 50s helping her elderly mother into a minivan, adjusting her coat collar before closing the door. A man maybe my age getting hugged by 2 grown kids who'd clearly driven a long way. I watched all of it from a wooden bench near the sliding doors, the November wind cutting right through my hospital-issued discharge hoodie because my daughter hadn't thought to bring me a jacket either. 6 weeks. 42 days of physical therapy, blood thinners, speech exercises, and nurses who knew my coffee order better than my own family did. I'd had the stroke at home, alone, on a Saturday morning in October. The neighbor's kid, a teenager named Bryce, who mowed lawns on weekends, had seen me through the kitchen window and called 911. Bryce. A 16-year-old boy I barely knew had saved my life. My daughter lived 25 minutes away. I tried calling her again from that bench. 4th time that morning, it rang twice and went to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I'd already left 2. I looked down at my phone, $43 in my wallet and about 8% battery. The rideshare app was already open on my screen. Estimated fare to my house, $38. That would leave me $5. Not enough for groceries. Not enough for the prescription the discharge nurse had handed me in a white paper bag. Not enough for much of anything. My phone buzzed. A text. "Dad, just get an Uber, we'll come by this weekend." I read it 3 times. "No, I'm sorry." "No, how are you feeling?" Just 5 words and a period. I typed back, "I don't have enough cash. Can someone come get me?" The reply came fast. "Use your debit card, Dad. It's not a big deal." My debit card had a $12 balance. I'd been in the hospital for 6 weeks. The automatic payments had chewed through what little was left in checking. I didn't tell her that. I just sat there holding the phone, watching the battery tick down to 7%. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the morning to warm up a little, though not much. Long enough to watch the parking lot empty and refill twice. Long enough for the discharge nurse to come out and check on me once, ask if my ride was on the way, and for me to nod and tell her yes, shouldn't be long. She'd smiled the way nurses smile when they don't quite believe you. I was still sitting there when a man stopped in front of me. "Excuse me," he said. "Are you Hal Grover?" I looked up. He was maybe mid-40s, wearing a canvas work jacket and carrying a paper coffee cup. Dark hair starting to go silver at the temples. I didn't recognize him at first. There was something familiar in the way he held himself, careful and direct, like a man who'd learned to take up exactly the space he needed and no more. "I am," I said. He smiled, and something in that smile reached back 20 years in my memory. I thought so, I wasn't sure. It's been a long time. He held out his hand. "Owen Sattler, you probably don't remember me." I shook his hand slowly, turning the name over. Sattler, and then it landed. "Owen?" I said it out loud before I'd finished placing the face. "You worked at the hardware store." "I did," he said. "Summers during high school." "You let me help in the back room when your regular guy called out sick," kept calling me back. He paused. "You gave me a reference for my first real job. Wrote it yourself on your business letterhead. I was 19. I remembered him then, not just the name but the person. A quiet kid, serious, always on time, the kind of teenager who didn't need to be told something twice. I'd run a small construction supply business out of a warehouse on the east side for 30 years. I'd had a lot of part-time help over the decades, but some of them you remembered. "You were a hard worker," I said. "You were the first person who told me that." He glanced down at the bench, at the plastic hospital bag beside my feet. "Did you just get discharged? This morning? Waiting for someone?" I hesitated long enough that he already knew the answer. He sat down on the bench beside me. Not too close, just close enough to make it feel like company. We were quiet for a minute, watching a car pull in and a young family pile out. "What brings you to St. Michael's?" I asked. Follow-up appointment for my father-in-law, he said. He had a knee replacement last month. I drove him. He glanced sideways at me. You need a ride, Mr. Grover? I wanted to say no. Pride is a funny thing. It doesn't check your bank balance before it speaks. I'd appreciate it, I said. If it's not out of your way. I'm already here, he said. Come on. His truck was a clean, older F-150 in dark green. He opened the passenger door without making a thing of it, waited while I got in, then closed it behind me. When he climbed in on the driver's side, he asked for my address and put it into his phone without comment. We drove for a while without talking much. He turned the heat on without being asked. I watched Columbus roll past the window, the storefronts and traffic lights, an ordinary Tuesday morning life of a city that had no idea I'd been gone 6 weeks. You still have the business? He asked after a while. Sold it 4 years ago when my wife got sick, I said. It was just too much to manage alone. I heard she passed, he said quietly. I'm sorry. She always brought lunch to the warehouse on Fridays. Egg salad sandwiches. I felt something loosen in my chest. She did. Every Friday for 27 years. She was kind, Owen said. The real kind. Not the kind people put on. I looked out the window so he wouldn't see my face. My wife, Sandra, had died 14 months ago. Pancreatic cancer. Fast and unforgiving. She'd been gone before either of us had time to fully understand what was happening. After 41 years of marriage, I was alone in a house I'd lived in for 3 decades, trying to figure out how to do all the small things she'd always done without thinking. We'd raised our daughter in that house. She'd grown up, married a man I'd never fully trusted, and moved 25 minutes away into a newer neighborhood with a homeowners association and a 3-car garage. I'd tried to be fair about my son-in-law. I'd told myself I was just an old man who didn't like change. But Sandra had said it plainly a week before she died, when she still had the strength to say hard things. He's not a bad person, Hal. He's just a person who only adds things up when the numbers benefit him. That was all she'd said. But she'd looked at me when she said it, and I understood she meant. Watch out. Owen pulled onto my street just before noon, and I felt it before I could name it. Something wrong. The house was dark, every window, the curtains drawn, the porch light off, and the November light thin enough that it should have been on. The driveway had a month's worth of fallen leaves packed against the garage door. The mailbox at the end of the front walk was stuffed so full the lid wouldn't close, envelopes and flyers spilling out onto the grass. Owen stopped the truck in the driveway. Neither of us moved. Mr. Grover, he said carefully, how long were you in the hospital? 6 weeks, I said. My voice came out flat. He looked at the mailbox, at the leaves, at the dark windows. He didn't have to say what we were both thinking. I got out of the truck and went to the front door. My key worked at least. Inside, the smell hit me the same way it does every time a house has been closed up too long. Stale air and something faintly sour underneath. I flipped the light switch. Nothing, the power was off. Owen had followed me in. He turned on his phone flashlight without being asked. We moved through the house together. The living room was undisturbed. The kitchen was not. The refrigerator had stopped running weeks ago. I opened it once, registered the smell, and shut it again. On the counter, mail was stacked in uneven piles. I picked up a few pieces. Utility shut-off notices, a past due bill from my pharmacy, a letter from my bank. I set them back down. I walked to the back of the house towards Sandra's sewing room. She'd used it as a hobby space for the last 10 years of her life. Quilting, mostly, and some watercolor painting she'd taken up after the kids left. I'd kept it exactly as she'd left it. Fabric samples stacked on the shelves. A half-finished quilt in the wooden frame she'd had since her 30s. The door was locked. I didn't have a key for it. I'd never needed one. This lock is new, I said. Owen shone his light on the doorknob. A bright brass deadbolt, freshly installed. Did you put it there? He asked. No, he didn't say anything. I leaned my forehead against the door and stood there for a minute, just breathing. In my truck, on the day I'd had the stroke, there had been a folder in the back seat. I'd been heading to a meeting with my accountant. In that folder were the deed to the house, Sandra's life insurance payout documents. $340,000, not a fortune, but enough to live on, if I was careful. And a handwritten note from my wife, about what she wanted done with her mother's jewelry. That folder was still in my truck. My truck was still in the driveway where I'd left it when the ambulance came. Except when Owen and I walked back through the house and out the garage side door, my truck was not in the driveway. It wasn't anywhere on the street. Owen found the stack of mail I'd missed the first time, pushed to the back of the counter behind grocery store circular. And in it was a letter from a property management company dated 3 weeks after my stroke. It was addressed to my daughter as authorized agent for the estate of Harold Grover. Not my estate, just the estate, as if I were already dead. The letter confirmed the receipt of keys for ongoing property assessment purposes. Owen read it twice. Then he looked at me. "Has your daughter been in this house while you were in the hospital?" "She has a key," I said. "She's had one for years." "And your truck?" I didn't answer. He found a chair at the kitchen table and sat down. "Mr. Grover, I need to tell you something. I've been a contractor for 15 years. I've seen this before. When someone ends up in the hospital unexpectedly and a family member starts having property assessed and locks changed on interior rooms. That's a pattern. It's not always what it looks like, but it's always worth paying attention to." I sat down across from him. "Owen," I said, "I need to find my documents." He stayed that night, slept on the couch. Before he turned in, he'd called the utility company and paid the reconnection fee on his own card, said I could pay him back whenever. By morning we had lights and heat and a working refrigerator, though there was nothing to put in it yet. I spent the morning going through what was left in the house. My files were in a cabinet in the spare bedroom, or they were supposed to be. The cabinet was there, most of the folders were there, but the folder with the deed and Sandra's insurance documents was gone. What I found instead, tucked at the very back behind a stack of old tax returns, was a document I did not remember signing. It was a durable power of attorney. Dated October 14th, 4 days after my stroke. At the bottom, in handwriting that looked like mine but didn't feel like mine, was my signature. I'd been in the ICU on October 14th. I'd been on a medication drip for the first 72 hours. I'd barely been able to hold a conversation, let alone read legal paperwork. But I remembered, or I thought I remembered, my daughter being there one afternoon. Her voice soft, her hand on mine. "Daddy, I just need you to sign this one thing. It's just so I can pay your bills while you're here. Just a formality. Don't worry about it." I'd signed something. I'd thought it was a check authorization. I hadn't been able to hold my head up long enough to read what it was. Owen looked at the document for a long time. "This gives her full legal authority over your finances, your property, your medical decisions," he said. "Everything, and it doesn't expire when you leave the hospital." "She said it was just for the bills, I know." His voice was quiet. "She counted on you believing that." I sat with that for a while. Then I said, "What do I do?" "You need a lawyer," he said. "Someone who specializes in elder law, someone who's seen this kind of thing." He paused. "I know someone. I can make a call today if you want. I don't have money for a lawyer right now." "Let me worry about that for today," he said. I looked at him across Sandra's kitchen table, the same table where she'd made egg salad sandwiches every Friday for 27 years. A man I hadn't seen in over 2 decades, who'd stopped because he recognized an old man sitting alone outside a hospital and thought to ask if he was all right. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment. "When I was 19, I was about 2 months away from dropping out of everything," he said. "No direction, no confidence. You gave me work when I didn't ask for it, and you wrote me a reference when I didn't know I needed one. You didn't make a big thing of it. You just did it." He shrugged slightly. "I always figured if I ever got the chance to return something like that, I would." The lawyer Owen knew was a woman named Adele Furman, who had an office downtown and 30 years in elder law. She met with us then today, free of charge for the initial consult. She reviewed the power of attorney and the property management letter, and she asked me quiet, careful questions for 40 minutes. "The POA may be voidable," she said at the end. "If you were on medication that impaired your capacity to understand what you were signing, the document isn't legally valid. But proving it requires medical records, witness statements, and time." She looked at me steadily. "Before we do anything else, I need to know, Is there anything else she may have accessed in the 6 weeks you were hospitalized? Bank accounts, investment accounts, other assets? I gave her what I could. Account numbers, the name of my financial advisor, Sandra's life insurance policy number. She made calls that afternoon. By evening, she had an answer. Sandra's insurance payout, $340,000, placed in a joint account my daughter and I shared after Sandra died at my daughter's suggestion, just in case something happens to you, Dad, so I can help manage things, had been withdrawn in 3 transactions over the past 4 weeks. All of it was gone. Owen drove me home that night without saying anything. He knew when to talk and when to just drive. I sat in the passenger seat watching the city lights go past and tried to think about my daughter the way I'd known her, when she was 7 years old, skinny-legged and serious, following me around the hardware store on Saturdays asking questions about everything. The way she'd cried at her mother's funeral with her whole face, not hiding anything. The woman who had done this felt like someone else wearing my daughter's history like a coat. The next morning she called, "Dad." Her voice was measured, careful. "I heard you were home. Why didn't you tell us?" "I tried calling you 4 times from the hospital parking lot," I said. "We were swamped. I'm sorry, but you're home now, that's what matters. Listen, I need to come by. There are some things we should talk about, some paperwork for the house." "What kind of paperwork?" A pause. "Just some things I've been handling while you were in the hospital. I'll explain everything when I get there." I told her to come at 2 o'clock. Then I called Adele Furman and told her to be there at 1:30. My daughter arrived at 2:05 with my son-in-law. He carried a manila folder. She carried a smile that didn't reach her eyes. When she saw Adele Furman sitting at my kitchen table, the smile dropped entirely. "Who is this?" she said. "My attorney," I said. My son-in-law's jaw tightened. "Dad, there's no need for lawyers. This is family business. Sit down," I said. They sat. Adele Furman opened her own folder and placed 3 documents on the table. "Mrs. Delaney," she said. My daughter had taken her husband's name. "I'd like to ask you some questions about 3 bank transfers made from a joint account belonging to you and your father between October 22nd and November 8th. My daughter looked at me. "Dad, I was managing your finances while you were incapacitated. That was the whole point of the power of attorney." "A power of attorney your father signed 4 days post-stroke while on a continuous medication drip," Adele said evenly. "His medical records from that day indicate he was administered a sedative at 11 a.m. Your father believes you visited sometime that afternoon." She placed another document on the table. "Visitor logs from the ICU confirm you signed in at 2:17 p.m. that day." My daughter said nothing. "There is also the matter of a property management company being contacted to conduct an assessment of this house," Adele continued, "and a new deadbolt being installed on an interior room without the owner's knowledge or consent. That was for his safety. My son-in-law said he shouldn't be operating a sewing machine after a stroke. There's equipment in that room that could. It was my wife's room," I said. He stopped. The silence went on long enough to be uncomfortable. My daughter was looking at the table. "Where's my truck?" I asked. She looked up. "We had it stored. The insurance lapsed while you were in the hospital and we didn't want it sitting in an uninsured state on the driveway. Where is it?" Another pause. "At a lot on Morse Road. We have the keys." I looked at her for a long time. At the person who had sat beside her mother's bed in hospice and promised me that she would always look out for our family. At the girl who had once made me a Father's Day card out of construction paper and glitter glue that said "You are the best daddy in the world" in her 7-year-old handwriting, and which Sandra had kept in a drawer in the bedroom for 40 years. "You took the insurance documents," I said, "from my truck and from my file cabinet." She didn't answer. "The payout from your mother's life insurance," I said. "You took that too." My son-in-law reached for her hand. She didn't take it. "Dad," she said finally. Her voice was different now. "Quita, we needed it. We were underwater. I was going to pay it back. I just needed time." "You were going to pay back $340,000, I said. She didn't answer. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked. She looked at her husband. Something passed between them. Then she looked back at me and she said nothing, and that nothing was its own answer. Adele filed the motion to revoke the power of attorney the next day. She also filed a report with Adult Protective Services and contacted the district attorney's office. The DA assigned the case to a prosecutor named Okonkwo, who was thorough and unsparing, and had, according to Adele, handled a dozen elder financial abuse cases in the last 3 years. My son-in-law hired a defense attorney within 48 hours. The attorney sent a letter claiming I was suffering from post-stroke cognitive impairment and was being manipulated by a contractor with a financial interest in my estate. I called Owen when I got the letter. I read it to him over the phone. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Do you want to fight this?" "Yes." "Then we're going to fight it." What neither Owen nor I knew until 3 days later was that my son-in-law had taken out a second mortgage on my house, using the power of attorney, using my forged signature on a notarized document, for $180,000. The money had gone, according to the bank records Adele subpoenaed, into a private investment account that he'd opened 6 weeks before my stroke. 6 weeks! He'd opened that account 6 weeks before my stroke, while Sandra was still alive. While I'd had no idea any of this was coming. Adele called me on a Wednesday night and read the timeline to me quietly, carefully, the way a doctor reads a diagnosis they've been dreading. I sat in Sandra's kitchen and I listened, and when she was finished, I told her to proceed with everything, all of it, criminal and civil, and I hung up. I sat in the dark for a long time. Owen found me there when he stopped by to check in. He didn't say anything. He just put on the kitchen light and made coffee and sat down across from me. "She knew," I said. He looked at me. "About him, what he was planning." I turned my coffee cup in my hands. "I think she found out at some point. She found out and went along with it, and I think she hated herself for it the whole time." I looked at the table. "She knew, and she said yes anyway." Owen didn't offer me a comfortable version of that. I was grateful. The hearing was 3 weeks later. The judge was a sharp, unhurried woman who read every document in front of her before she spoke. She asked me questions directly. She asked Adele questions. She asked the defense attorney questions with the expression of someone who has heard this particular argument many times before and found it no more convincing today. The cognitive impairment argument lasted approximately 12 minutes before she set aside the medical opinion submitted by the defense, which came from a physician who had never examined me in person and who, it turned out, golfed on Saturdays with my son-in-law's business partner and asked me to summarize my financial history before and after the stroke. I did. She revoked the power of attorney before noon. Criminal charges were filed the following week. My son-in-law was charged with elder financial abuse, forgery, and mortgage fraud. My daughter was charged as a co-conspirator. They both pled not guilty. That night, my daughter called me from her attorney's office. She wasn't supposed to contact me directly, and we both knew it. She called anyway. "Dad," she said, "I need you to understand I didn't want this." He pushed me into it. He said you'd never find out. He said we'd pay it back before you even got home from the hospital. "And you believed him," I said. A long silence. "I needed to believe him," she said. "We were in real trouble. The business debt, the house payments. I couldn't see any other way out. You could have called me." She didn't say anything. "You could have told me what was happening. I'm your father. I would have helped you." I heard her crying on the other end of the line. The real kind, not the performance kind. I knew the difference. "I know," she said. "I know that. I've known that the whole time, and I did it anyway, and I don't know how to explain why except that I was scared, and he made it sound reasonable, and I stopped being able to think clearly about anything." I held the phone. "I'm not going to drop the charges," I said. "She didn't ask me to." "But I need you to understand something," I said. Your mother knew something was wrong with him. She told me, at the end, that he was the kind of man who only added things up when the numbers worked in his favor. She saw it. I didn't listen as closely as I should have. I paused. She would not want this to be how it ends between us, but she also wouldn't want me to pretend it didn't happen. My daughter was quiet for a long time. "She was right about him," she said finally. "She was right about everything." She usually was. More salts then. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. I know you are, I said. That matters. But it's not enough by itself. The trial took 8 months. My son-in-law's attorney was skilled and expensive and relentless. He questioned my recall, my judgment, my relationship with Owen, Owen's motives, Adele's billing hours. He submitted 17 exhibits. He called 3 character witnesses. He could not explain the bank transfers. He could not explain the second mortgage. He could not explain the account opened 6 weeks before my stroke. He could not explain the visitor log. The jury took 4 hours. My son-in-law was convicted on all 3 counts. He was sentenced to 4 years in state prison and ordered to make full restitution. My daughter pled guilty as part of a negotiated agreement. She received a suspended sentence, 2 years probation, and community service. She wept when the judge read the terms. The judge looked at her without particular sympathy and told her she should be grateful for the opportunity to demonstrate that she was capable of better than what she'd done. She drove to my house the following Saturday. I met her at the door. I didn't hug her. I wasn't ready for that. But I let her in, and I made coffee, and we sat in Sandra's kitchen for 2 hours and talked for the first time in over a year, like people who have run out of anything left to hide. It wasn't warm, it wasn't easy, but it was real, and sometimes real is the most you can ask for. The insurance money was recovered in part. $210,000 of the $340,000 clawed back from the liquidated investment account. The second mortgage was voided. The house was clear. Sandra's room is unlocked now. I go in there sometimes on Sunday mornings and sit in the chair by the window where she used to work on her quilts. The half-finished one is still in the frame, exactly where she left it. I used to think I'd have it completed someday, maybe find someone who could finish the pattern. But lately I think I'll leave it the way it is. Not everything that's interrupted needs to be finished. Some things just need to be kept. Owen's kids come over on Sundays now. His daughter is 8 and his son is 5, and they've decided on their own that I am something like an honorary grandfather, which I did not expect and do not take lightly. His wife, a straightforward woman named Lena, who makes better biscuits than anyone I've ever met, brought a casserole the first time they came over and has since established a habit of coming early and rearranging my kitchen cabinets in ways that make considerably more sense than however I'd had them before. My daughter comes twice a month. We are careful with each other. We are working at it. I don't know what it will become, but I know that whatever it becomes will be built on something true instead of something avoided, and that's more than we had before. Some weeks, Owen stays to help me with projects around the house. Small things mostly. A gutter that needed clearing, a door that wouldn't hang right, the back fence that had been leaning since the summer before Sandra died. We work in the kind of companionable quiet that doesn't need filling. One afternoon in late spring, while we were repainting the garage door, he asked me how I was doing. Not the social version of the question, the real one. I thought about it for a while before I answered. Better, I said. Not all the way, but better. He nodded and went back to painting. That seemed like enough. I think about what Sandra said to me near the end, about the man who only adds things up when the numbers favor him. I think about the fact that she saw it coming in some shape, even if she didn't know the details. And I think about the fact that she trusted me to figure it out. Not before it happened, maybe, but afterward. She left me the tools to rebuild. Not in any dramatic way, just in the ordinary accumulation of a life lived with honesty. The neighbor's kid who called 911, the 20-year-old memory of a reference letter written on plain business stationery, a woman named Adele who knew the law down to its bones, a jury that read bank statements carefully, and Owen, who stopped because he recognized someone who needed stopping for. I don't know that I've earned all of that, but I know what I owe it, and I know what Sandra would say if she were sitting in that chair by the window right now, the late morning light coming through the curtains the way it used to, her hands moving through fabric without looking down. You worried too much again, Hal, but you figured it out. That's what matters. She was usually right.